Okay. I'm not even going to give context. Just keep going, Josie.
Okay, so, one of the things that we share is that we are not trained professional communicators, and yet we have this podcast, and we love communicating with each other. And we know that when we share our just authentic communication and dialogue, that it's landing for all of these, I don't know, thousands and thousands of people that we're so grateful are listening. But so here's the funny thing is that when you create a podcast, you are forced to go back and listen to yourself, which is hilarious and instructive.
And humbling.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, so that is true. And baseline, we all have quirky minds, and our beautiful kind of trialogue here, we balance each other in really beautiful ways in the way that each of our approaches to thinking and communicating and clinical reasoning, all of these things, we support each other, and we know that, and it's really cool. Also, sometimes in my world, I end up traveling, and I just actually came back from an extended trip, and I'm a bit jet lagged. But here's the thing. In my quirky brain, I allow myself to just trust the lack of specificity. And it's happened to me a few times. So I'm going to tell you two embarrassing stories. Early in my career, when I was first doing a lot of traveling for training, this was like before internet, okay? So a long time ago. And I landed in this airport in Ohio and realized that I hadn't written down for myself where I was supposed to go.
Oh, Trace.
So here I am in this airport, and I was like, where am I going? It was so that's kind of hilarious. But in a flash forward moment, I was flying home from Europe yesterday, and I knew that I was flying from Poland through Germany back to Denver, Colorado, where I live, and somehow in my head, I had coded the airport in Germany as a different airport. So when I got to the airport and I check in, it said, oh, welcome to this flight from here to here. And I was like, wait, I don't think that's the right flight. And it was this weird moment of me being kind of like, I know I put all the pieces together, but then sometimes I release the detail and I just go with the flow, which is sort of what I learned how to do in therapy, because in the clinic, I want to hold on to a lot of thought and detail outside of the session. But then once I'm in the session, I just want to allow whatever unfolds. And living a life like that over the last several decades, where I can be quite precise and specific, but then quite open-ended and flowy. Sometimes those two things run into each other in hilarious ways.
Oh, well, I think to me, that's like resilience. I don't know, but your strengths-based language is so wonderful to hear, because you can describe, not you, but people, anybody can describe moments like that and just be really hard on themselves. And that tendency is very strong for many people. And so it's what a beautiful model of just, enjoying the way that you are and just going with the way that you are. And I think yesterday I did a you, Tracy, where I was very loose brain-wise. Having babies brought to life the fact that I'm a little spicy in the way that
Neuro spicy.
Oh my God. Yeah, for sure. And yesterday I was like, oh, my brain, I've lost something. I love your brain, so I did a Tracy, because I've seen Tracy do that. And I'm like, okay, don't get hard on yourself. Just pull it back together, get a little grounded if you can. But I need to share a really funny story, because it's it's quite hilarious. I think you may have heard this story before, Michelle. I don't know. So hopefully you can just listen to it again and enjoy it.
I don't know.
Yeah. So I, as a new therapist, maybe 2 years in, I was treating this little boy and he had significant ADHD profile. And I was like to his mum, don't you think it'd just be like fascinating to just be in his brain for a day? Like, what would that be like? And then like fast forward, not thinking or not knowing anything about like whether I might have ADHD or what. Fast forward 10 years and I'm in seed with Michelle and then we're like learning about ADHD and I'm like, man, do you think I have this? and she just, oh my God, you just laughed and laughed. You're like, dude, how long has it taken you to potentially figure that out? And then I thought about this kid and I'm like, that is so funny because I'm there not knowing anything that like, yeah, mate, you're on the same bandwidth. Like, yeah, you are in his brain probably. Not his brain, but like, no wonder you love this kid and so fascinated by him because you get him in a way that, is just fun for me. Like, and that's why
You were cute.
I've had to do so much work on matching the kiddos that need the less intensity and also holding my regulation in higher intensity because I tend to go a little bit wee at the top end, which I like. It's great, it's fun, but I don't want to be not therapeutic, right? So I still have to know how to be aware and then feel it, see it, help match it, all the above. Anyway, that's my one funny story of coming to realize, oh yeah, maybe there's like something going on here. And then, of course, being the way that I am, it's like you go through the diagnosis and then you never even bother to go back for the final appointment. So whatever. Isn't that diagnostic in itself?
Oh, I forgot.
Anyway.
Oh, I got distracted. I think what we have in common, I guess, is that we are positive, and it's not that we don't know our individual differences and we can have a little giggle, but at the moment when you're at the airport going, oh my God, it's not beyond me to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like, so it's like, oh, here we are, old friend. You've kind of got the wrong airport in your mind. How did I not realize that and not micromanage that? But we could be fearful. Like, I know when Corey said, hey, how about this podcast? Do you want to do it with me? I was like, I don't speak very well. My thoughts are a bit erratic. I don't know the neuroscience like you. I probably never, ever will because I can't remember it. The other features I remember vividly, the feeling and the knowing when we had that conversation. And I, those felt experiences of, oh, Corey's just had a dawning that she might be ADHD. Yeah. Hold the space, Michelle. Like, giggle not too much. Like, could just be like, yeah, maybe. But we could be fearful. And I certainly know when you invited me, it was like, oh, it's not going to my strengths. Having a podcast where we speak and we're, got to get into the neuroscience. Oh, that's not my strength. And I listened back and it's the same thing. I was like, oh, I have to drop out of this podcast. But you keep showing up. It's like, oh, come on, Michelle. People... We get lots of positive feedback. I think we're modelling. Part of it is modelling that we all have individual differences. We all have strengths, but it's of value and of service. And it's like, oh, I just hope that it is because we'll keep showing up.
Yeah. And like, I think for me, I listen back later and I'm like, who is that speaking? Yeah. It's not me. I don't know. How did I have that thought? That wasn't my thought. What's happening? Like, I literally feel like I'm learning again from myself after listening because I'm like almost out of body sometimes, like in doing this discussion. Anyway, I'm just like, I love it so much because it just, I think it's the learning and, and if people are along for the ride, then that's just amazing because it can become a collective
Yeah.
process for all of us, which is so good. And so, yeah, you just have to be aware that we love our neurospiciness, and it comes to the podcast in great ways.
And if you're wondering, do we know that we're neurospicy? Yeah, we do.
Yes.
Yes, we're tangential. We actually have different interests, so I feel sorry for you, Trace, because Corey and I will have thoughts at probably the immediate same time. She goes, bing, and I go the other way. And then it's like, hey, Trace, like, what do you think, Trace? So thanks for holding both of our different thought patterns.
Yeah.
And listeners,
Yes.
thanks for sticking with us. We know we're tangential and not always the most polished speakers.
So because last episode I had to help my girl at the end, I missed some of the neuroceptive modulation onto state, autonomic state, terminology stuff, and the way that Tracy was describing it. I listened back while I was editing it to try and get my head around it. I don't know if I fully hold it. So what I was going to try and do is say where I'm at, and then what we were hoping to do today, but we are flowy. And so we were hoping to sort of move towards the high route of S and A, I think, because last time we kind of sat in those low networks of the sensation and affective systems and tried to nut out some terminology in those spaces. And so now we're trying to move towards the high route, but I'm going to start us back in the low and see, like, I'm already like, I don't even know where to try to say something, but I want to start with neuroception. Neuroception is kind of that constant surveillance of safetyness. And then I was thinking about that and modulation, because I feel like they still get really tricky for me to, I think it's because I want to really separate them, and they're actually kind of not one and the same, but they're so integrated. I think that's where I kind of landed was, well, if you're constantly surveilling safetyness, you kind of have to do that sensorially.
That's where
Yeah. And so, but then I landed on the whole fact that, well, if you have a decent ability to modulate, as in respond to the sensations that are coming in without them overwhelming you, then you're inherently going to feel safer. So I feel like they're not quite the exact same thing, but they're so connected. So I wanted to clear that first, Tracy. Is that a correct kind of way to think about these two things, and are they kind of a network that are very shared? Are they almost like a interhashed networks or something?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think at the end of the last episode, we were sort of talking about this phrase that comes from Ruth Lanius mostly, and that's this idea of a sensory matrix.
Yeah.
Okay, and that kind of caught Michelle and sort of related to your question, Corey. This is evolving languaging that I feel like we're right on the forefront of wrestling with it, right alongside people like Dr. Lanius, Dr. Porges, and other people. And the next year, for me, I'm hoping to be able to collaborate a bit more in that space and help to bring our perspective into the mix a little bit more. So that's just an accountability thing that I am not in charge of, but I know it's one of my goals, because of the question is a question that I feel like the answer is yes. It's this very integrated matrix that can be hard to separate out when you're talking about the modulation circuitry separately from the perceptual circuitry that we'll talk about, later as we are today, as our conversation unfolds here. But that perceptual circuitry is a lot more specific, and it's a lot more mappable and discrete and clear. Whereas this circuitry that happens in the modulation system, even all the way from the peripheral receptor level, it starts to have this cascading influence that can be a little bit tricky to keep discrete. And in that, the line, the division between what is neuroception versus what is sensory modulation is a super artificial one almost. So we have to be comfortable with the matrix of it, with the fact that this is this set of overlining kind of hashes that are helping each other out with this very broad goal of really the neuroceptive goal of surveilling, detecting, and mobilizing what's needed in order to resource. And the first level of resource is basically adjusting and modifying thresholds of responding and garnering activation or deactivation as is needed. So all of that is kind of happening simultaneously based on the code, the tag, or the label. You could use any of those words of relative positive or relative negative that comes in. So we always say that it's a sensory affective dual process, and that's because the affect is coding the relative positive or negative value of the sensation.
Yeah.
And so sensation and affect kind of ride together. But right away, the way that starts to influence, if there's a detection that something is potentially too much for the system, then you're going to have this massive set of shifts that start to happen around the thresholds and the activation or the deactivation. So we might use the word mobilization to summarize activation and deactivation, because it's some change that happens. And all of that is happening not just in the sensory circuitry. It starts to happen in the motor circuitry. It's happening in the autonomic nervous system, in the general arousal system. And then it'll start to affect the other A functions like attention and other even higher functions that we don't always label in the wheel of A's, for instance, but our orientation thresholds change, and what become source versus background kind of starts to shift. And all of that is happening across the sensory systems based on what's going to happen. So it isn't like an all or none phenomenon. Like whatever happens in the tactile system doesn't necessarily have to happen across all the systems. And so there is this variation in if you start to have a detection that something doesn't feel quite comfortable, the discomfort might arise first tactily because perhaps the source was some crawly feeling you had. And so you might then co-mobilize auditory or visual in that direction, but you don't necessarily have a vestibular overactivation in the same way. So they differentiate in that way. Yeah, so the matrix of surveillance and detection is sensory based for sure in neuroception. But it's also kind of more complex than that, because what you were just saying is so pivotal, is that if the sensory system itself is already sensitized, then how does neuroception relate to that? And so our knowledge of sensory-based issues, it isn't subsumed by what we know in neuroception. It's actually additive, but I don't think that most of the world understands that. Is that making sense to both of you?
I was picturing when you said, like, if a situation for a person, is going to overwhelm them, like that's obviously outside of their window or their optimal range of capacity or whatever you're going to call it. I was picturing that circle of best capacity for an individual. And if something's going to overwhelm you, then it's going to shrink down your circle or your window or your range. And then that was where I was picturing you then saying, okay, and when your range is shrunk down like that, and anything that's falling outside of that is going to make all of your A functions more difficult, like what you said in the last episode around now, is their ability to attend impacted, or is their arousal now way higher, or not where it needs to be for them to actually sink in and land and engage, or is there autonomically, it's usually the mobilization piece to deal with the fact that now I'm in a situation where the experience feels outside of my ability to actually be able to manage it. And so now everything is mobilizing me. So, you know, that's where you said the thresholds change in terms of my whole nervous system might amp up the need to detect and surveil everything. So the threshold will be way down for my ability to tolerate anything else, because I need to really protect myself from any new information. I feel like now I have a bit of a sense of what was happening in the last episode, but I needed to start there because I wanted to clarify like how I'm thinking about it, because I, again, didn't want to think that sensory modulation is neuroception, because it doesn't tangibly, intuitively feel like the same thing to me, but I just felt like they had to be closely interacting somehow. And so I'm glad we started there, but I really want to flesh out the matrix thing. That made me laugh so much, Michelle. She's got the hat, she's got the glasses. When's the movie coming? Anyway, so should we start?
Can I just jump in there? Something you said around attention, that attention might dial down, or it might dial right up for the thing that's salient for the person. So if it's tactile and it's that, you know, sensation, perhaps it's spider-like, or it's the woolen jumper, the attention dials up.
Maybe it gets locked in,
hyper-focused. Maybe that's not the right word either, but it's like, I can only think about tactile. So when the educator's like, hey, we're doing our phonics now, it's like, I can't do phonics because I've got a scratchy woolen jumper on, or whatever it is, and they can't shift off that, which makes people look rigid and inflexible, or whatever it does. Anyway, so that it's interesting, isn't it? It's like,
And haven't we all had an experience of like something that's stressful or feels like a threat to us really just grip holding our attention? Like, I can't not think, like everything of my brain just keeps going there and going there and going there.
Well, and that's where the sticky thoughts come, and I think we all do, particularly because, you know, Tracy, the airport example, it's like, have I got the rest of the things right? Like, where am I? So then you start going, where am I landing? Darling, I don't know where you're picking me up from because I can't check. I mightn't be right. You know, that thought becomes perseverative, you know, because there's validity in it. It's like,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that idea of kind of the sticky thought is really important for us to consider here, because when there's ease in this system, this low route of SNA that includes the autonomic functions that are sort of supporting it and drawing from it, the ease of it allows for shifting and selecting and honing in and then shifting off and all of that, all the way through the system, from the lowest sensory levels all the way up into cognition and deep meta thought, like thought about thought. So it kind of rides all the way through the system. And the stickiness that can happen is so interesting, because I think one of the things that we get really good at in the therapeutic space with individuals is that we understand a sticky thought not as a difficulty, but rather as a portal into understanding where their mind is and where their body is and where the integration or the difficulties with integration are. And so if I'm working with a child who is uncomfortable in their body and that feels like a sticky thing to them, I'm not going to label that as a deficit, right? I'm going to think about that as, what can I do? What can we do? What can the world around you do to help you find comfort where that discomfort is arising from? And the same would be true where a lot of our kids find that if I just attend to the thing that I understand and know and hone in on, that gives my world sense, and I can create shape and meaning and get rid of the stuff that's so hard for me by just honing in. And it can feel like a sticky thought, like, yes, let's talk about door openers, or let's talk about fire extinguishers, or let's learn about all of the ways that the wires run through the building. But understanding that those sort of sticky thoughts are there for a reason. I always think about how in occupational therapy, we learn about purposeful engagement as like a cornerstone. And it's such a gift to interpreting how people are in the world, to understand that everything has a purpose. And I use that phrase a lot, right? This idea of for the purpose of what? But that's one of the phrases that I think is just emblazoned in my logic pattern anymore, and that allows me to see the positive side of that coin instead of the hard side of it. Then we can think through the layers. So thinking through the neural networks is something that I think I've trained my brain to do, and that's what the spirit does for us, right? So we kind of started in the low route of S and the low route of A, and then the brain doesn't stay in one circuitry, and it doesn't stay in one network, because the purpose of modulating or detecting either neuroceptively or through sensory modulation if something is safe or not is so that we can engage in it, so we can do something with it. And the doing isn't just, it's rarely just to experience and savor the moment, because it gives rise to all the other functions, right? My attention gets bigger and deeper, then my creativity starts to roll. My social engagement system allows me to start to share that with other people. And then I can co-create that and through co-occupation experience it. So it's always for this broader purpose. And I think that unfolding, it's such a cool model that we have to operate from in our practice. You know, it's powerful.
And it's really positive and allows us to reframe. I guess I absolutely see my job. I think Kim Barthel talks about, she's got a course, behavioural detective, and, you know, that phrase, I feel like I'm a detective and I've got this suite of understandings that you're helping to build, Trace, that it allows me to be like a translator. You were talking about being in Poland and having a translator. Sometimes I feel like I'm a translator. It's like how some people are perceiving a child, the behaviour that's tricky to understand unless you have a map or a way to kind of reframe, like for the purpose of what? Like, yes, they're talking about the flags of the world a lot. At face value, that's getting in the road and he needs to stop talking about flags in class time and he can only talk about flags in recess time, or you know what I mean? It can lead you down the path of thinking in that way, where this is like just positive and hopeful, and it leads a path forward that feels helpful, but it allows us to translate in a more positive way what's happening for that child. And so with someone who has that lens to look through, possibilities open up rather than close down, and you tend to get a bit more behavioural and containing and, you know, we've got to do these things to help them adapt or cope really with a world where this is like, oh, wow, let's see this child through a different lens that allows us to be different and with that child and build capacity for all of us, really.
It makes me think of the other day in one of my sessions in mentoring, I was like, you can't work on the tactile system when they're outside of their capacity. I'm sorry, but you're not going to help them process touch sensation if they aren't inside their current window of tolerance. You got to get inside it and then help from that space where they feel safe, to then try to maybe broaden out capacity or broaden out the ability to move into like a discrimination orient and approach response to touch, rather than an overwhelm, withdraw and fearful response. You got to get on the other side of that. That's never going to work. Otherwise you're just reinforcing the same pattern of protection.
I remember, this whole visual story just came into my mind. So when I was very first learning about being a therapist, I was in my first job, and I worked 4 10-hour days. On the last day of the week, I spent a year every Friday with Lois Hickman. Lois was one of the kind of original OG, OT, sensory integration therapists. She was a colleague of Dr. Ayers and was on this very initial faculty that Dr. Ayers had put together for the CSSID that hasn't existed for a very long time. But Lois is this wise, incredible person who was my mentor and is my mentor still. I haven't talked to her for a couple years, but she's amazing.
You've got her.
Yeah, I hold her right here. And she has a farm where she's done her therapy, wrote the first chapter on nature-based therapy 30 years ago. And she's amazing. So anyway, I remember that she was telling me that on this particular Friday, we were going to work with this little boy who had really significant sensory defensiveness, and his tactile defensiveness was quite extreme. And he was a little guy who was about 7 years old, and he was a toe walker. He didn't like to have touch contact with the surface. He had just 1 or 2 pairs of clothes that he could wear, had limited all of these things. And he had come to Lois at this early part of elementary school, having lived for 7 years in this nervous system that was always in protection and always in defense. And so I had understood this more academically, but I don't know that I'd ever seen a child with that kind of classical and intense presentation of defensiveness before. And so I get to the session, and Lois is kind of, planning some things and has a variety of things available in the clinic, and we're going to just kind of see what happens. But she also had brought with her a couple of jars that had milk from her farm that she had taken from her cow before she came in. And I saw them sitting there. I didn't really know what was going to happen here. So this little boy, he was pretty interested in Lois, and he was new to her too, but he was interested that she knew all these things about farm animals. And we weren't treating on the farm that day. We were treating in her clinic in the bottom of a church. But anyway, she had brought this milk, and she started to tell him about how we could make butter. And he got really interested and curious about that. So we took the jars and poured the milk into these little jars, and then started to just jump on these trampolines and shake and shake and shake and shake and shake and shake and shake. And the milk is, shaking, and it's transforming over time. It was kind of cream, obviously. It was fresh from the cow. And it's transforming over time into butter. Okay, so it takes about 20 minutes, but it became super motivating because at first it starts to change a little in quality, and then you're looking at it, and Lois is quite magical at drawing these moments of glimmer and wonder to any little thing that's happening. So this was this kind of shared moment with this child of, let's get really curious about what's happening here. And I realized that what she was doing was she was using the warmth and the touch and the contact, but mostly what she was using was wonder and curiosity, and creating a space of safety so that his nervous system and his body and his sensory systems could experience the experience through the lens of safety and connection and curiosity, and that was really what the treatment was all about. And I could feel it and see it and understand what was happening. And as this session proceeded, we ended up having this beautiful golden butter that kind of emerged in these little jars. And then we could decide what to do with the butter. Should we put it on crackers or bread or carrots or strawberries that were all available? What would be the best way for us to experience the butter? Should we paint pictures with it on some black construction paper that would take the oil? Like, what should we do with it? Or should we mix it with ice cubes and see what happens when it gets firm? And so all of these were possibilities. And again, just such beautiful classic occupational therapy, using activity and exploration and engagement. But this undercurrent of let's create safety and see what happens versus let's chase this symptom of defensiveness. And in that, the pressure and the vibration and the rhythm and the bilateral integration were the qualities through the vestibular system, proprioception, tactile, interoception, that were allowing all of this to unfold and enhancing those sensory qualities, but it was the container of safety that allowed it all to be meaningful. And anyway, it was such a beautiful learning for me to sort of be like, aha, I understand. And I know that those moments with her allowed me to crystallize a lot of thinking that I could then carry forward. But wow, so cool. So anyway, somehow that story came to mind.
But I think it brings to life, neuroception and modulation, sensory modulation. And so obviously there's, in real life for this 7-year-old boy, opportunities to engage tactilely in the world that he was neurocepting as a threat and withdrawing, and even coming into a clinic. He could have kept doing that. I think that speaks volumes about having lots of opportunities in clinics and following that child's lead and need, because the milk might not have worked. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's just one of our things that we go, oh, I'm on a farm. I did actually bring milk, however that came to be. It's like, oh, I'll bring that in today. It might land or it might not. How many times have we all had, oh my gosh, I think I've got it. I've got this great idea, and he might be interested in the farm because, sometimes when we're hearing stories about children, it's, the first questions are what's going really well for them, what are their interests, what are their strengths, because we're trying to lead that to support safety and curiosity. It doesn't always fly though, but I'm sure the magic of someone, or the skill and maturity and the trust in the process that Lois has, by the sounds of it, is that if it wasn't milk, it could have been the teddy bear puppet, or it could have been the ball, or it could have been something else. It's just these things being available and letting go, or trusting that the child will be attracted to or interested in a thing. And if they're not, I've got it. And if they are, I can follow that, So sometimes the milk and the tramp and the planning that I've got this one. That worked really well for that last child. I'll bring in some more milk. We'll do milk therapy. I'm being cheeky. But, it's like, so beautiful, so beautiful. And I guess that's what we're trying to do, is always find or facilitate safety in space and in relationship, and support it with the sensory input that might enhance and continue to allow that embodied sense of safety, and that we just keep inching and inching. But that's the trick.
And to foster that sense of safety and curiosity and wonder, no matter what, the plan happened to be, because even though that moment lives large in my mind, I don't think I've ever replicated the milk moment like with milk, but many times with other kinds of opportunities, right? It's so funny. Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, gosh. And don't they sit with you? Like, I remember seeing Sarah McInnes actually treat in a similar way. But, when you're seeing that, and I remember you spoke about the scientists that were in your clinic, it's palpable. And as an observer, you're not quite sure where it's going to go. You may or may not have noticed the milk when you came in. It was like, oh, she's left the milk on the bench in the treating room. That's weird. Why she left that. As an observer, it's like, I don't know where this is going to go, but you're kind of watching it, knowing and feeling, and you got something in it. Later on, you come back, oh, that was just brilliant, because you had all the components that allow the folding to occur. It's a felt sense of something's happening here. And then, as you were saying at the start, Tracy, you've got to come back and clinical reason, like, why did that work today? Like, why did that work?
I'm sitting here because sometimes I have to pop in and
amazing.
out. And I'm sitting here, I'm laughing as I'm breastfeeding with the whole, sometimes the milk's not going to land. And Michelle being like, it's milk therapy. And then I just had this thought, like, isn't it so powerful, Tracy, how you flipped the narrative from deal with the defensiveness to let's get curious and get into possibility, and then how much that influenced his ability to engage with touch and get into the discriminative functions of touch and to settle into exploring that within a relationship. Like all of the pieces came together, but the initial thing she did and amazingly well was flip it into curiosity. And like you said, Michelle, where do we find that for each of our people that we're working with?
And I think it's the trust that we have in ourselves to get to the end goal. So the end goal might be toileting, it might be sleep, it might be increasing the range of foods that they can eat. Like sometimes we're given the task of, this is really what we need to fix because they're about to go to school next year and toileting has to come within the next 3 months, to, not feeling the pressure of that to pull out the toilet paper, or, it's like, leave the toilet and the toilet paper and, all of that. We're not going directly there. There's something else. It's not that they don't have cognitive capacity to toilet. They know about, time toileting, all those things. If they could do it, they would have done it by now. So we have to come at this a different way, and there's no toilet paper for the next 10 sessions or, whatever.
Absolutely. Well, we almost got to discrimination. Almost, with the butter and that example was pretty good for some movement through modulation to discrimination functions, but we didn't quite get there. So maybe we should do that next time.
Maybe we should do that next time. What I will do is I'll connect it just in one way, and that is to say that if we think about that session, therapy has to start in that low rate of S, low rate of A. Because if you don't have a sense of safety, you're not going to get very far. And then once you spark engagement and that social engagement system becomes available, the other thing that becomes available there is the high route of A. So lots of times I'm going to follow the low route of A into the high route of A, and then that's going to open the door of where are we headed here. And very often where we're headed is into exploring ideation, exploring, deeper levels of planning or deeper levels of schema development or affordance exploration. So we probably are going to end up over in the high route of S, because so much of the richness of our learning and growth kind of emanates from there. But the high route of A holds this motivational biasing system. And if you're held in protection, your motivation is constrained by that. This whole system, these circles compress in and are constrained. And then when they open up to the possibility of, let me try it again, let me do it harder, let me try it a different way, then you start to get the fluidity and flexibility and grittiness that's available from the high route of A. So it all does weave together, and we can talk next time about that more. But in the meantime, maybe people will listen to your rap, Corey, about the spirit, because you pulled all the fine points in that ditty, and way to go.
Model, S-A-N-M. I don't want to do it here because I will forget the words. But you can go and check it out on our Instagram page, on the Spirited Conversations Instagram.
That was genius. You are genius. I love your mind.
So much.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It was very fun. And if you're nerdy like us, you will hopefully enjoy it. I wanted to I can show you the curiosity and the fun that can come from the model. So you can come and learn it with us. So it can bring you joy like it brings us joy.
Wonderful.
Yay. This is probably a good place to stop. So we will catch everyone next time.
Thanks, guys.